Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and we have some amazing friends and guest hosts with us tonight to talk about an interesting French film. But before we do that, let's find out who is here tonight. Introduce yourself.
Why don't I kick us off?
All right.
I'm Brian, and I'm your monkey expert tonight.
Monkey.
I'm Blake. I'm your Brad Pitt expert.
All right.
And I am Michael. I'm your guest host tonight.
Awesome. There we go. We watched Jetée. So this is a French film from 1962. It's a short. It's like 28 minutes long.
Something like that.
There's probably about 4 to 5 minutes of introduction that gives a brief explanation as to what it is. And with this film, we decided, because our friend Michael here is a cider enjoyer, we picked a couple. We have a French cider and a Shilling cider. So the cidre that we have that we purchased over at 1856 was actually a recommendation, and shout out to those guys for recommending it because it was quite good.
Absolutely.
Probably a little bit better than the Shilling. The Shilling was a citrus maxima, so it was like straight orange, really, really strong orange flavor. But we'll talk about those in a minute. You guys have much more to talk about than I do on this film, but I have a basic avant-garde gem directed by Chris Marker, has stood the test of time, remaining the cornerstone of cinematic excellence. This film's brilliance shines through its brilliant plot, leaving you in awe of its unique narrative structure, primarily composed of still images that evoke a haunting sense of time travel. So if you've seen the film 12 Monkeys or the TV series 12 Monkeys, those are based off of this short film, which I think he originally wrote this. I don't think this was based off of anything else. It's just something he completely...
No, I think this was a groundbreaking film for its time. And this is a departure for Movie and a Beer because this is not a current film, nor is it kind of a popular film. But I would say it is a piece of art that was seminal for my kind of understanding of other ways to make film and tell a story as a film student. And Michael, I'm going to kick it over to you because you actually used this as a teacher for your students.
Yeah. So this past semester, I was teaching narrative in art and design. And as a photographer, getting my master's degree in photography, I don't really have a lot of experience with cinematic art. And so I was like, okay, if this entire class is about narrative and telling stories, what's a good example I can use? And this is a film that I had seen before, and I thought it was a great example. The entire film is 28 minutes long, and they use about 442 photographs to make this entire film. So I use that as the base for their entire semester project.
Wow.
Right, and it is a film, and there is actually one shot in the entire film that is
picture.
full motion.
That was so delightfully, not unsettling, but just unexpected. I guess it's a film, right?
It's a film.
It's
It
all
is a film.
This is
still
a
shots.
film.
Yeah, it's a film.
It's visuals, there's transitions, there's movement. So
there's a story being told.
They're zooming in and out of the frame of the pictures that you're looking at.
It's all narration, I guess.
Well,
It's a
and
narration.
actually, there's only one zoom
Is
in
there?
the film, I believe.
And that was
and
the
that's
very beginning.
the very first shot.
Yeah. Where it's
But there are a lot of
tight in and then-
dissolves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all dissolved. I was asking Brian, I was like, well, let's count out how many dissolves versus actual cuts versus soft dissolve or going to black, fading to black, then coming back in, which happens. I mean, those are the three basic transitions that they were using.
Yeah.
And they used them really effectively because some of the slow dissolves really helped tell the story. So there was light music in the background and then just a French narration. Unfortunately, like what we watched had subtitles, and the subtitles were not necessarily exactly lined up, but that didn't sort of matter to this film.
It didn't detract from the film because, we're all competent enough adults to remember what we read on screen 10, 15 seconds ago to apply to whatever the scene is.
Yeah.
Or it just, lined up just enough for it to make sense. You talk about the music, Dan, made me realize I made a note about the whispering, and I wrote to myself, why is there whispering every time this guy would go under? I guess under, or just be sent through time through a memory.
The whispering is
it's all the scientists.
Yeah,
I realized it as I wrote it.
Prison guards, because he's a prisoner.
That's right.
And he's really a experimental lab rat.
Which I thought was a really, really cool way to show time travel through memories. Because I mentioned in the movie, like, we can't go to space. Mm-hmm. We got to figure out how to get somewhere that's not here because it's World War III. Everything's terrible.
Yeah.
And just the idea of him still hearing the present, I guess, while he's in the past. I thought that was so fascinating.
So if you've seen 12 Monkeys, the movie, you will catch all the inspiration and almost some direct shot, like oh yeah, they represented it that way.
Yeah.
They put some different twists on it because obviously it's a Hollywood film, and
And it's Terry Gilliam, who's insane.
yeah, but they do a really good job of representing this approach to filmmaking in a really respectful way. I don't think there's some other twists. It's like World War III. They talk about France, Paris being blown up.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily happen in 12 Monkeys. It's a virus that gets spread and just wipes everybody out really
they sent him
fast.
back to kind of figure out who spread it, I think.
Who started the
who started it?
end times?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he finds out. It's like, oh, you're in the psych ward because you think you're from the future, and everyone thinks you're crazy. And the person you run into in the psych ward is that person who starts it. It's like, how many instances of randomness actually play into this story that's already been told? They're sending it. It's like it's a loop. It really is just a loop. Like he's reliving this instance.
Well, this movie does the loop perfectly well. Like I wish I caught it earlier, but was delighted to be surprised by the reveal at the end of why this memory stuck in his head so strongly. And I thought oh my God, that's so cool.
He's watching
That's
himself
so
die.
brilliant. Yeah.
Hey, don't spoil it.
No, they didn't. Well, okay, yeah. 1962. I'm
Flip it out.
spoiling the heck out of this.
Yeah,
one.
but who has watched this film? And I would
Nobody.
say, if you are a fan of film history, this is a film you should watch.
Absolutely.
Or
This-
if you
this
want
should
to
be
learn
canon.
how to tell a story visually,
It does
you
a
don't
really
you
good
don't
job.
need sync dialogue to tell a good story.
It does conjure the gag, the bit that French cinema is all weird and still images and black and white. Like it feels
Well, yeah,
kind of
it
like that
is.
joke, but it's an incredibly made film.
Yeah, I mean, 1962. It is an art film. It is not.
Oh, yeah.
The French New Wave.
Giant or Breathless or anything that was coming out of Hollywood in 1962. It's no Bullet.
So one of the things in the narrative that you talked about with your students was pacing a part of that at all, as far as like, so obviously this film has pacing changes that occur, where there's some fast transitions, some slow transitions from picture to picture versus picture to black, then back in, and those transitions as well. It'd be interesting to watch this with just a narration without any music or background noise, because that, I think, the music that they play in the background really heightens what you see.
Oh,
so
yeah,
they use it
I'd
really
agree.
effectively.
Well, and it's not just music, because
There's
at the
little sound
moment of
effects.
climax, they use the sound of jet engines as this low, ominous rumble underneath.
And as it gets louder, it's building up to that action.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, pacing was difficult in the class because, we only had 9 class periods to actually work with the students. And instead of making a whole 30-minute film, I was putting them in groups of 3 or 4 people and telling them, okay, you have got to make a 10-minute film. Kind of like limiting their, because we had limited time, like, let's work within those parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have time to teach them a lot of the really advanced programs like Premiere Pro and stuff like that on proper movie making editing. So it was more about the photography and the emotion and the substance of the image that they're trying to capture, how that plays in their story. And then we uploaded it in Adobe Lightroom and assembled it all there. So we were kind of limited on pacing because you can only set the duration of the images collectively. Like you can't say, okay, I want this image for this long, this image for this long. It's like you're setting the duration for the entire thing.
Interesting.
And then transitions, same way. So you can't be like, okay, this part over here is going to be like rapid fire one right after the other.
They're all
Image,
going to
image,
be
image.
60 frame dissolves
Right.
across the whole project.
Oh, that
But
would
one
be
thing
so-
I was
that would
telling
be
them
tough.
though, and this was kind of like you were mentioned that point right in the middle where it actually is cinematic, where her eyes are opening and moving.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful parts about this film leading up to that is the transition between the images started to get longer to give a sense of motion going from one image to the other. And that was something I emphasized with the students. I was like, if you can get that transition longer and your images are similar in style, you're going to get that impression of motion in it.
Right.
And that's one thing I think this
they
film
are
does beautifully.
more intimately tied as a series of photos.
Absolutely.
They are become sequential, which is what
Yeah.
motion film
Yeah.
is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as far as a sci-fi story goes, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of the space and war. And
Yeah,
this and
yeah,
that.
it was-
So it plays a lot into like sort of it didn't use technology like Buck Rogers used technology, where it's like it's a crutch to tell the story. This had no technology.
Well-
it was they showed him getting a shot and had some things on his eyes, and that was it.
Well, it's more grounded sci-fi. It's not the heightened atom whatever punk of Buck Rogers, which is like we have a laser gun, I have a mega boots or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very much here's what we have. Here's what make it work. I loved that it was just a huge eye mask, kind of.
Yeah.
Like no container holding him in. They were just because again the whole technology is find a memory that you can hold on
and
to
send it back to him.
And I asked Brian about it. Like, they want people with good imaginations, or they want someone who has like a solid, firm grasp on a memory from their childhood? I thought that was a really cool concept. It's a very like artistic way to do
Yeah,
science.
I mean, it's kind of like a teleportation spell in the
Yeah, yeah.
RPGs we play.
Right.
You have to intimately know a place where you're going
Yeah,
to be sent.
yeah.
And this place happened to be the striking memory from his childhood.
On this pier near an airport, I think.
Yeah, it's
at the airport.
the jet-
It's
Okay,
at the
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean I don't know if we even have in English a name for that, but the observation deck at an airport.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, so he has the strong memory from his childhood, and they're using that as his anchor to get him back to that time.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the technology. You know,
Right.
this is a post-apocalyptic World War III film, like where it's set. So there's no technology. Everything's been wiped out. They said
they're
everything's
working
destroyed.
in the sewers, it looks like.
Right. So really, it's that memory. That's the technology that's sending them back.
That's so cool.
So if you think about memories, they are a sense of time travel.
Right.
And if you've got like that strong of a memory that can take you back there, like think about the dreams that we have, right? We wake up from some dreams that are so vivid, so strong, it feels like we were actually there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you have memories like that, that is the sense of time travel.
And I thought that worked well with the fact that the whole movie, aside from the one shot, was still images, which is kind of how memory functions.
Right. You have snapshots of your past.
Yeah, it's clearly on purpose, and I really appreciate that.
Definitely.
I mean, it's just short. It tells a complex story. I kept looking at, we needed to pace it out. We have 2 things to drink. And I'm like,
So you gave us our second beer 8 minutes in.
yeah, I know. I was a little soon on that because I couldn't quite. I was like, when did we start? I was like, it felt like we had been watching for more than just a few minutes.
Yeah.
It felt like,
Well,
20
there was a
minutes in.
lot of story kind of packed and a lot of information. I mean,
really
there's
did.
Yeah.
so much visual information with a series of still photos.
Yeah.
So very heavy in the front, kind of slows down in the mid where he experiences going back for periods of time.
Multiple times.
And he just shows up and disappears. They don't show that, but they show him interacting with the woman.
This is a love story, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought so.
And I would say that moment leading up to the one live real time shot
Yeah.
was a love montage, but told in stills. I mean, I definitely got that. That's what that was. The whole tour of the museum, kind of the natural history museum.
Yeah. I loved her take of you're a ghost. Like you show up occasionally and we just hang out and then you're gone, and I've accepted that. Like that's man, what a beautiful film.
Yeah, which is a concept that's been in other more modern films.
Oh yeah.
Of a time traveler that pops in and out of a person's life. And I'm thinking of a very specific movie, but I can't tell you what it is, dear listener. But yeah, they form this relationship, even though he just pops in for 5 minutes or 10 minutes every couple of years.
I'm not doing a joke. Is it the time traveler's wife? I've never seen it. I presume
it might be.
I presume
It
that
might
was
be.
the premise.
Yeah, it might be. I have seen that, so
Gotcha.
that's legit.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the film, it starts off with he's on this jetty at the airport, and
Yeah.
he sees this woman, and that's the memory he's locked onto that allows his time travel. And one thing I've always wondered is like, did he fall in love with her at that moment, or was there something about her that like he just locked in on and was able to time travel? And then as he goes back and spends time with her, is that when he starts to fall in love with her gradually? The more and more he goes back.
Well, that's the thing I love about time travel movies is figuring out, no pun here, like when something
Right.
significant.
What came first, the
like,
chicken or the egg?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
did he have that memory because he fell in love with her and he's remembering his time going back, or did he remember that he said as a kid? I think he said like I was a kid on the pier, but he's a grown man. We
Or
spoiled it a little
or
bit.
is that one of the details from the day when he saw something horrible happen?
Right.
Well, and he referenced it too about
like
like at the very
someone
beginning. He
falling out of
references
a-
like why, like questioning why he has this memory. Why is he
That's
going back
right.
to
He
it?
does.
Would he have that memory if he would not have traveled back?
Exactly.
And so that's the loop.
I
that he's
love that
trapped
stuff
in.
so
Yeah.
much.
And I'll say my first viewing of this film, I always had it in my mind that he had such a strong memory of that day was because that was the day the world ended. And I thought that was going to be the twist.
Oh.
But
Which
that
it's
wasn't
not.
the day.
That's a
That
good
was
call.
not the day
That's a
the
good-
world ended.
That's a very good call, though.
Yeah. And I'm sure we've seen that in other, the many time travel movies
Oh, yeah,
since
yeah.
then are referencing this.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or,
for sure.
or other films that were based on this.
Absolutely.
Because this was, I can't think of anything before this that really dealt with time travel and those paradoxes. There were sci-fi novels. That
Right. Was The Time Machine ever a movie or a show or something?
The Time Machine was 1932.
Yeah.
That might be
it's
that might
been
be the
remade.
closest thing, but that's really
But that didn't deal with paradoxes.
no.
No,
That was
well,
just
he kept trying to go back to change it. So in the original, he went back a few times to try and change that moment or
Okay.
change her decision on what she was going to do without interfering directly, so indirectly. And she kept dying anyway. And then he went back too far accidentally. And then
Oh,
it's
right,
like,
right,
how
right.
much did he screw up the present and future based on that individual timeline that he was
Yeah.
on? So as many times as that's been remade, I think that's a similar in approach, but that H.G. Wells was written well before this. That's why
Yeah.
I'm like, I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
know if
for
this was
sure.
based off of an actual piece of literature or was it just completely just made for film?
it feels like it was maybe inspired by the idea of time travel. But again, like Michael said, like the science is the memory.
Yeah.
It's not the pads on his head or the shot or whatever. The science is a very human thing to do is just recall a thing and just use it as a focal point, an anchor.
Well, and one thing I was trying to look up, and I can't find anything on it, but was there anything done like this before Chris Marker came up with this?
That's an
Like, time travel had been discussed. I remember like
Oh, yeah.
Right.
stuff my dad
It's
watched
been
in the
written
50s,
about.
right? But in this kind of way of like using a memory as the vehicle for time travel, had that ever been done before?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, and there's lots of cues about or notes about how this has inspired other people, inspired other films, music videos, things like that.
Right, yeah.
But I would love to actually talk to Chris Marker and find out what was his inspiration for this. Like, how did he come up with this?
Right. Yeah. To answer your question, I don't know of one, but my knowledge isn't voluminous. I don't know everything.
Look at Mr. $5 words over here.
Yeah.
Jeez, Aaron's gone. You become Mr. Smarty Pants.
Yeah, I gotta keep up. I gotta represent.
All good. So this, again, less than 30 minutes long. There's probably about 3 to 5 minutes of introduction slides of just visual text on the screen.
Yeah.
If you get this, you can find it either subtitled or dubbed. I think you had mentioned the one you'd watched in your class was English dubbed, and that was off of Netflix or
No, Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, so streaming.
And I believe that there is a version on YouTube, both in English and in French.
Yeah. So this is out there. You can find it. I highly recommend if anybody is interested.
And I would actually say, there is something to watching it in French with subtitles, but I think for a first-time viewer, it may be better with English dub.
Absolutely.
So you can focus on the imagery.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really important.
Reading the text, yeah.
Yeah.
And for anybody that is curious about how it's actually spelled, it's Lajetee.
Yeah, Lejette. Check this out. I think we all really enjoyed it. Thank you for recommending it. Thank you, Michael, for
pleasure.
being available to talk about this really interesting film.
Thank you for having me.
A narrative or a story or what was it, novel? They gave the name of it. So it was a photo novel.
A photo novel.
Photo novel. Yes.
Yeah. Photo
In the-
roman. Photo roman.
Yeah, photo roman. So film story, film novel.
Too cool.
Awesome. So at this point, I think we all are thumbs up in it. It's a really interesting and good film to experience and watch. Not really age appropriate. There's no nudity. There's no violence. There's no nothing.
Kids would
It's
be
just-
bored by it.
They would be so bored.
If a
very
teenager is into film, they'd probably give it a shot, but it is a very
Yeah.
deliberately
Oh,
paced.
I think
Sure.
a teenager would dig this.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if they want to make films.
Agreed. Yeah.
But there's no like huge action scenes, explosions, stuff
No,
like that.
no.
So
No, it's
No,
very, very
it's
simple.
it's intellectually for those who are intellectually curious.
Yeah.
the
is
visuals
great
tell the
film.
story.
Absolutely.
The
And-
narrative is there to support that. And that's
zero
what I
special
like.
effects.
And even if you're not into kind of experimental film, this is only 30 minutes. I would watch it if you're into story and how story is constructed.
I'd second that.
Okay, let's transition over to these two ciders that we had. At this point, I think we sampled both. We poured them into a glass. The first one we just purchased at 1856, which is a tap room that's over in northeast Portland off of Prescott and 15th.
Dan's looking at me like I know where it is.
I'm
I
like-
never remember where it is until we
I'm
arrive.
visualizing
and it's
the
just-
map in front of me. I'm not looking at you.
I'm a
the
visitor.
map.
Don't ask me.
We've
Brian,
gotten-
where is it?
Yeah, we've gotten things
Over there.
from them a few times.
Nailed it.
But the person on duty that was working the counter, I was like, we need something that's French, that's not expensive, but will be interesting. And he's like, this one. He's like,
Nice.
he's like, we have one bottle of this left. That's how good it is, because they have bottles of everything else.
Yeah.
They have like stock. I was like, all right, let's do that. So this is Cidre, Cidre, and that's the name of it. And this is a Fermier de Normandie, Ricolant from Michael Brovian. So Breaveoine. Anyway, so it's 4.5%. It's a semi-sweet to dry. Very clean, crisp, apple bright flavor, really effervescent, dance on the tongue. It popped when I opened it, and it kind of foamed out a little bit, which I was hoping wouldn't happen because I had to go grab a towel real quick because I was like, oh my God, I'm wasting it. But no, this is a wine-sized bottle, 750 milliliter. Just a lot of acidity on the tongue, really light and bright. And I think for the beginning of the film, with the initial telling, be it that there's historical content, there's current content, and then future content, and then past content, all provided in weird order. This, I think, went really well with supporting that narrative. It wasn't distracting at all. It was just really kind of interesting and bright. Any thoughts?
I would agree with the bright note. It really had a lot of just flavor that I really enjoyed. We've had stuff before, but there's too much flavor, and I thought I can't enjoy this and the movie. I hate this. This was, I think, the right amount. It was a lot, but it made sense.
Yeah.
And I tend to drink a lot of dry ciders, and this is a little less dry than I'm used to. And I think that goes really well with the film because the film has a lot of substance and a lot of the black and white photography has a lot of gradients.
Yeah.
It's not just really contrasting.
Yeah,
I guess.
I think the flavors matched up
Yeah.
with what we were watching. And we picked this because Michael is more of a cider than a beer drinker at this moment in time. So your thoughts on this?
I enjoyed it. I don't know that I've ever had a French cider before, so for me, it was a new style. But I really enjoyed just how crisp it was. Because we had gone and had flights of different ciders earlier, and we had like all these different ciders with all these different flavors. It was just a nice, refreshing change to have just a traditional apple cider with nothing else in it. But it did have just that little bit of sweetness to it that I think, personally, because I like things a little bit on the sweeter side, I don't think I would have liked a completely 100% dry cider. So that little bit of sweetness
agree.
made it just like super
Completely.
nice, very easy drinking. It had like just enough effervescence to give just that little fizz on the tongue, which I really enjoy.
So it's going to make you pucker a little bit.
A little bit,
So there is some tartness to it.
but not a sour face.
But it's not a sour face, which is like, is that a byproduct of the yeast or is that the apples that they're using? And I think it's the apples they were using because it seems like a really complex. This doesn't seem like it's a single orchard apple. This to me tastes like layered. It seems like there's more than one thing going on here, or maybe that's just the yeast they used to let it kind of age over time, or they aged it in different barrels, or it doesn't quite say on the bottle.
They use
No.
apples from the future and the past
There you
and
go.
the present.
And it's a really complex flavor. I enjoy it a lot. It tastes like when you say heirloom, it's like this has like an heirloom apple, old school orchard it's got that robust roundness to it.
Yeah.
I guess. The second one that we had was from Shilling Cider, which is based out of Washington State. They have a tap room up in Seattle, and they have one here in Southeast Portland. We did some tasting theirs just earlier today, so it was nice to be able to pick something out of that. That was kind of the intent, was like, let's find something they've got and bring it back for it. So you had picked the Citrus Maximus, which is kind of an orange, citrusy, really kind of a citrus bomb. But it's more of like, to me, it has more of like that effervescent orange oil, orange peel kind of vibe than apple. And on the side of the can, so this is 5.2%. The other one is 4.5%. So really light for the full robustness that it had. This one is a little bit more sweet than dry. It does have, it's not just apples. This does have juice from lemon, limes, blood orange, the orange peel super present. It has tangerine, pineapple, pear, elderberry, and purple carrot juice for the coloring. So this is a bastard of cider from my perspective. I'm like, it should just be apples. And no, they've added, this is a very complex product, I would say. It is cider, yes, because that's the base and that's what they're starting with. But adding all those other things to it, I think while it is a really interesting and good flavor, makes it really complex. More so
I had no idea that there was all that in there.
Yeah.
Because when we read the description at the cidery, it only listed like, blood orange and citrus. And you didn't really like the little sheet descriptor of it didn't dive into like all those complexities and all those notes. And so now I'm gonna have to go back and re-drink it, knowing everything that's in it. It's like, oh darn, can I pick out this time? Can I pick out this?
Yeah. And they're from concentrate. All those other, the apples is apple juice, but all those other things are from concentrate. So they're not like fresh pressed in it. It's like, we have this, we're going to start adding these other flavoring agents to it to see where we can take it, which is a whole art and science unto its own. It's like blending wine, like blending cider. You're adding these other things to get a specific aspect from those of dryness or tartness or coloring. Because this is, I thought it looked a little bit more orange than it would like yellow. We'll have to open another can to take a peek. But so Brian, I know you had mentioned not really your jam.
Not really my jam. And I also don't think it went so well with the film because it's kind of this floral, fruity, tropical thing. And this is not a story about the tropics.
Floral, fruity, tropical.
It's not a light story at all.
No, it's not.
And even though the complexity works with kind of the complexity of human emotion and time travel, I would say that kind of detracts from watching the film a little bit. And just thematically, for me, it didn't work. It was fine. It wouldn't be my choice for a cider to just drink on it would be a nice cider for a summer day, but not one I would personally pick.
Well, that's totally on me because I've never done this podcast before. So,
the
meaning of the connection between everything is a little lost.
Criticism is never of the person who picked it.
No,
we do this podcast to try new things, and we
this
never know
definitely
what's going to go.
So Shilling Shilling Cider House has a little, like I said, location down in Southeast Portland, and definitely check them out. So they have like 12 of their own ciders plus another 40 ciders available
that constantly rotate.
And did you guys? I know you guys did a flight of 12 ciders before the podcast. Is there one that you had that might have gone better with the film?
There was a lime apple one that was really bright and sharp that I think and dry. They didn't have it available in cans or bottles. It wasn't by Shilling. It was by somebody else, I think. And we probably could have got a growler of it to go, but I was like, let's just pick something. But that's okay. We're just trying to figure out.
We try stuff on the
podcast.
And
it's not a bad cider. It's just not necessarily for this specific visual experience.
Right. Yeah. You threw it to the person who's not going to like this style cider.
So this
is give the big lowdown. Anyway.
Again, so they do have a lot of copy on the can that explains like all the different things that are in it, and that they have a little slider like dry to sweet, and it's way over by the dry side, and it was. And again, I think it had just that citrus acidity hit to it that kind of overpowered the tongue more than say this apple based one where it's like, yes, there's apple in it, but it's all orange flavor, the blood orange and stuff. Whereas I think we all really appreciate and like the just base cider, based apple, has some complexity. It tastes like it's from heirloom, old school, really old orchard apples that have that complexity of age to them, where it's more, it's a robust flavor versus a lot of different flavors, all kind of crammed into one.
Can I kind of take an aside here and ask you a technical question?
Sure.
Is brewing cider similar to brewing beer?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Okay.
So you press the fruit, you put it in a vat, you add the yeast, you let it sit, and that's it.
Okay.
You can, as you say, has this been pasteurized? That means it's been heat flashed to kill the bugs in it. And most professional level ones might have been pasteurized so that they can survive at room temp as well as, being chilled. Most fresh ciders have not been pasteurized at all. So you're just getting that raw juice, probably filtered. Most bigger productions are filtered. Some smaller ones aren't. The French ciders, most of the ones that I've had are not terribly filtered. And they like that rawness. You may get pulp in it. You're going to have yeast settlement. I was expecting yeast sediment in the bigger bottle, and we didn't have any. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Nice.
It's completely clear, start to finish. Head retention was good on it. The second one, not so much. It just went flat. And, I drank it quickly because I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. But it was distracting from the film.
Yeah.
So
to me, it really felt like kind of one of those flavored waters. A little bit.
A little bit, because it's got too much going on.
Yeah.
It needs to just be more shallow. I think we were expecting, well, okay, it's a French film. Let's do something French. And cider is something that it's either wine or cider. You're not going to find French beer here in the U.S. easily.
Right.
So it's something we've done before for the podcast. And I think I'd highly recommend it. If you have a market by you, in the Portland metro area, there's a lot of places you can get good French ciders because they're imported. This is imported directly to Portland by companies. So this hasn't traveled across the U.S. or anything. So it's brought here from France and then it's sold. I would definitely check it out. There's a lot of small shops that have them. Discover some really nice cider. I had never heard of this. I'd never seen it on the shelf because the guy's like, "Yo, this is brand new. We just got this." And it's like, well, let's try it. And lo and behold, really good, clean.
That was good.
Yeah, that's a great choice.
Most of the ciders that you can find in the Portland area don't necessarily have this clean, solid flavor. They're always trying to push the envelope and do weird stuff.
Yeah.
And like open ferment, so it's wild or not. And this is just very clean, just nice, semi-sweet to more dry. If you're out there and you want to watch this film, if you choose to do something French, you could do wine with this, would be kind of interesting. Find a nice red, a nice deep, deep red that would dry you out really. A lot of tannins on the tongue because these both had some tannin. There's really dryness to them. I would say most of the film is fairly slow, but if you have to take a break, pause it. You don't want to miss what's going on the screen. We had to do that a few times. I was like, all right, I'm going to get up and get the next can. It was like I tried to duck out for like 30 seconds or even less, 15 seconds. And I was like, oh, I missed some dialogue and I missed some visuals.
And it's not even just if you have the French version, not even trying to read the subtitles, but the images, they're packed with so much information, and you really need to have time to study it. And,
right. Yeah. And
I think,
absorb the individual frames of information.
So here's the question. Was the guy a filmmaker before he did this photography and doing this, or was that something that happened? He didn't have the money to pay for the film, to have a film crew do it. So he staged it with actors with some very simple sets, and none of it was. It looked like it was all natural setting, except for
the trivia about the one image that's shot full motion speaks to that he didn't have enough time to do,
or the budget,
to do a full film, and that's why that one. I mean, it also works to an effect. That's kind of the heart of the film. That's the moment he meets and is with his lover, right? And suddenly it's full life. It's not just a snapshot from memory. It is an authentic moment.
He's creating the memory that he has in the future from the past, which is backwards because he traveled from the future to make the memory from the past that he remembered from another memory. And it's just, so it's a cyclical kind of thing. So any interesting trivia about did you find anything online about it?
Well, actually, this was not his first film that he made. I haven't found a comprehensive list, but his first film was in 1952 called Olympia 52, which was a 16 millimeter feature documentary about the Helsinki Olympics.
I've seen that. It's interesting because
Really?
It's like you see athletes competing and you're like, oh, they could totally wipe those dudes out today. Because it's like, skill sets and abilities, and it's like, but it's really interesting. I've seen that. Again, I think it's black and white, and I think it's narrated with just some basic soundtrack in the back. So,
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's done a number of films over the course of his career, and while he was working on La Jetée, apparently he was also making a 150-minute documentary that he called Les Jolis Mai that was released in 1963. Pardon my French if anybody knows proper pronunciation, and I just butchered it.
Not me.
But his probably his most famous ones are La Jetée, A Grin Without a Cat from 1977, and Sans Soleil from 1983.
I've heard of Sans Soleil, but I haven't seen it. So.
Yeah. All right. So all those film nerds out there, get out there, check this out. It's available on streaming services, YouTube. It's out there. Find something French to drink with it. It is only, like I said, like less than 30 minutes long. It is fascinating. Pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's worth your time.
It is.
Even if you're not into experimental.
If you've seen 12 Monkeys, either the TV show or the movie, you will like pick up on it instantly. You're like, oh wow, I remember that. I remember the staging of how they got to those. And I can imagine them having used this film, these stills, as the storyboarding for telling some of it.
Yeah.
Because it was
how do we shoot this scene?
Yeah, it's like, okay, we're gonna take a high shot from, way, half a story above the ground level and show the distance, and it's, all in focus versus, we're going to be close up when we want to focus on the person dying and moving. And it was like, you got to see at the end of the film, I think they did a really good job in the surprise.
Yeah.
The scientist came back to kill him, or somebody. And in the movie, it was one of the other travelers. It wasn't a scientist. But in this instance, it was a scientist. And it's like, well, how did the scientist know to go there? Because it's all based on the person's memory.
Yeah.
And they do say that they monitor and watch the memories, but it's like, how are they doing that?
And this was one of his, he had gone many, many times. So,
Well, and it said in the beginning, like this was his, like that spot, that moment at the airport with the woman, that was his clearest memory. That's what he locked onto.
And they didn't, and the movie doesn't even talk about was it successful or not, because they sent him to the future and he got a power supply and then came back, and then they sent him back one more time, and he knew that was it. He's like, I'm either going to get killed when I get back because they're going to, I've done my job and I'm done with. I've done what they
got
want.
what they needed.
They got what they needed from me, and so they're sending me back to say goodbye. Oh well, no, actually, you're just. So again, there's been a lot of movies that say like, oh, if you're in your dream and you die in your dream, do you really die? Scientifically, yes and no. So what does the brain do? How does it process that?
Yeah.
And thus, it's a memory, but he's experiencing the memory as it happens live. But it's just a really interesting loop of logic, and check it out if you can.
And I would say also, regardless of whether or not you like it or you don't like it, give it a chance and watch it more than once, because there are so many little things in it.
Yeah.
Do yourself that favor just so you can go back and catch it all, because, if you don't like it and you go back, rewatch it, pick up on those little nuances that might completely change your perspective of it.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for taking the time and hanging out with us. La Jetée, check it out. It's a good film. Find yourself some French wine or some cider or something fun and dry. I think we all agree more dry, more better for this film, because it's not going to distract. It's going to kind of help with the nuance of the film. And as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts.
If you don't hydrate, you'll dihydrate.
Thanks for hanging out, everybody. And, we'll catch you on our next episode. So
Thanks for having me.
yeah.
Keep listening, and thanks for listening.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Take care.